This is a JCW Countryman, the brand new JCW Countryman. This is a U25 Countryman, so it's the brand new model that is debuting shortly. In fact, this is going to be on sale in the United States in a couple months. It's going to be on sale in Europe at the end of this month. And it is an all-new car from Mini that is the largest Mini of all time. But it is a JCW that's not the most powerful. We've actually lost some power in this car. It has gone from 306 to 300 in the EU, gone up to 312 in the US, but down on the foot-pounds of torque from 331 to 295 across the board. So, okay, great. On paper, interesting. What does that mean? It is what we wanted to find out more than anything. I mean, understanding this car and understanding where it sort of sits in the sort of historic Mini lineup is kind of what we were after. So we went to Portugal to actually experience this car at the international launch with Mini. And what we found is a car that is really refined. I mean, and I say that in the best way. So let's just cut to it. I mean, I have been driving this car all day, and it is a better sorted car than the one that came before it. The suspension tuning, the damping, it's more comfortable, yet it does not feel less sporty. There's more mass here for sure, but the way that they have tuned the suspension, the steering, and the throttle response, which is noticeably better than it has been in the past, noticeably better, frankly, than I've had in a Mini in a long time. You get the sense of a car that reacts quicker to your inputs. The reaction is also exactly what you want, what you expect, which is, again, it's what you expect in a Mini. We didn't always have that. You know, if you've listened to me or just read articles on MotoringFile just around some of those previous JCWs, you know, there is a throttle mapping issue I continuously talk about, meaning that the cars just don't have the reaction that you expect underfoot, you know, when you are hitting the accelerator, which is a shame because everything else felt so sorted in those cars. This is now gone. This JCW Countryman does not have that problem whatsoever. Now, of course, there's a lot of complexity here that we haven't had in the past, and I say that knowing Mini's tried to create sort of a minimalist view of everything, and also try to, you know, offer more functionality with a minimalist sort of experience. And while that's true to a degree, you cannot not talk about the experience modes. So right now we're in core. I'm gonna flip it up into go-kart mode, and right away you'll see a little area and a terrible sound and a different sound inside specifically. What I love about modes is the ability to really change the driving experience. So right now, drivetrain is Sport Plus. I'm gonna make that Sport, so it's gonna be a little bit less at red line on second gear on a side street. I'm gonna turn off the experience jingle, which is that horrible sound of somebody saying woohoo. I can't stand it. It drives me absolutely nuts. That now is off permanently, which is I think a very important bit of news here. That is something you can turn off individually. But what I'm really interested in doing is fine-tuning this and talking about, once you get it dialed in, what this car feels like. Go-kart mode is essentially the old sport mode, if you will. And it is it's a mode that, you know, for lack of a better term, is the one that is probably gonna be what you want if you are after feel, for lack of a better term. Did I mention I'm in Portugal and don't really know where I'm going? That's important here. So we are in go-kart mode right now with the JCW Countryman. We're down on power in the EU. We're down on torque everywhere. And one of the questions I personally was curious about is, do you feel it? You know, is that actually something that, you know, an owner is gonna feel day to day? And the quick answer is no. The reality is that there is some back-to-back that I'll probably do later, and I might have a slightly different opinion, but having driven and lived with the JCW Countryman for a while, and now driving this, you really don't sense a huge difference in power. What you do sense is the DCT. So the other big change is Mini has moved from an 8-speed ASIN automatic transmission, a torque converter, to a dual clutch transmission that is sourced from Getrag. Couple things there. So dual clutch on paper should be the better transmission. So there's 2 clutches. You're able to grab a gear before you need it and hand it off seamlessly. So again, theoretically, this should be a car that shifts quicker, more seamlessly. Everything about it should sort of feel more natural, especially when using the paddles, which, yes, there are paddles, of course. So what's the verdict? You know, in a lot of ways, I would say that it's true. I mean, the DCT here is the best I've felt from Mini by far. I know it's, I'm sure, related to what we've seen previously in the Minis, in the F56 generation, if you will. But it shifts quicker. There's no question. Is it perfect? No, it is not. It is not as quick shifting as you might want in this car, which is, of course, a JCW. But it does hold gears. Like it does a lot of the things that you really would hope it would do. And I think when I consider what that means from a day-to-day perspective, this is the better transmission. And I had assumed that would be the case. Again, this is new. This is an opportunity for Mini to kind of, you know, right some wrongs in the past from previous automatics. And I think they've done a great job. Now, that said, it is still shifting slow at times. You know, this is a 1.0 product we're looking at. It's obviously it's a pre-build or pre-production actually, and it is, you know, there's moments where you hit it and there's a beat or two before it actually shifts, which not ideal. The other thing that you'll hear is the sound. So in go-kart mode, you have more pronounced sounds that are in the cabin. What is amazing, what is disappointing, you know, and it's not Mini's fault, is if you listen outside the car, they are not there. There is nothing outside this car that sounds like it does inside. I mean, we're living in a different age. I mean, you know, the European Union has strict noise laws, apparently, that automakers are following in this way, which means, yes, you know, we want to give you the visceral quality of the cars you've always driven. We want to provide feedback, but we need to maintain quiet outside. So it's unclear what the US version of this car will have in terms of sound. I mean, there's a particulate filter in this exhaust that in the United States we won't have, and other countries won't have as well. So the particulate filter muffles the sound, for lack of a better term, even more than a muffler. It constricts it in a lot of ways. And if you go out there and read various car boards and Reddit subreddits, et cetera, you'll see that a lot of these people who buy these cars, these European cars that have the particulate filter or some variation in it, will rip them out and put it in something aftermarket if you're not in the EU. If you're in the EU, I'm not sure how that works. Please let me know in the comments. Be curious to hear. So what we end up with, and again, this is a European spec car, what we end up with is a car that sounds great on the inside, does not sound like anything special on the outside. You know, I think clearly there's a lot of people out there that are going to be incredibly disappointed by that. You know, if that's the case in the US, of course there's aftermarket exhausts that will likely change that entirely. So just keep that in mind. There's probably a fix for it. It will cost money. There's also a chance that, like I said, in the US we won't have that problem. So a couple other observations that I've had over the day driving this through the hills and along the coast of Portugal. You know, this is a car that's so much more fluid than it was in the past. There's a wonderful synchronicity between the different inputs and reactions and the way the car ultimately responds to your inputs at the limit. And why I say that is because, you know, we've had in the past, whether it be the automatic transmission, whether it be a suspension tuning that was quite frankly brittle, or whether it just be down to the run flats. There were these elements within the JCW Countryman that did not allow it to feel like ultimately fluid through a corner and give you the most confidence possible. And this car is better. There's no question about it. And there's some reasons for it. I think for one, and I saw this on the X2, the BMW X2 and the BMW X1, the suspension tuning is much better. So it's much more comfortable. We have comfort and we have sport. We have comfort, we have performance. It's all there, finally, which is a huge, huge improvement. We also don't have run flats anymore, which is also huge. And then, we have, I think, Mini kind of finding their way a little bit more, because having driven the X2 just yesterday and driven this, there are key differences there. Even though they share a lot of the metal underneath, they share engines, there's some key differences. And the Mini has created, or I should say Mini engineers and designers have created something that feels unique to their brand. Does not feel like an X1 or X2 in most cases, which is a really important thing. So where does that leave us? The all-new Mini Countryman is a bigger, more comfortable car. It packs features and tech that we could have only dreamt of in a Mini just a few years ago. But if you're a JCW fan, that might oddly sound disappointing. Yeah, here's the surprising thing. The new Countryman JCW is the most capable and, crucially, most engaging Countryman JCW we've ever driven. The synthetic nature of the sound is disappointing, but it's a byproduct of the age we're living in. And let's be honest, much of the driving dynamics of all new cars are fairly synthetic these days. But it doesn't mean there isn't real enjoyment and engagement to be had in this car. And this is where the new Countryman JCW delivers, surprisingly, even more than the previous version. And that's despite the 137 pounds extra added to the car. Make no mistake, at 3,825 pounds, this is nothing like a Mini Cooper in terms of driving dynamics. Yet for a small crossover, this is a rapid and engaging car that feels immediately fun when you set off. In our time with the new Countryman JCW, we came away with a distinct impression that it has a sharper turn-in, more feedback, and just generally felt more alive through the wheel than its lighter predecessor, all while being noticeably better damped, more comfortable, and offering more room for passengers and cargo. It's down on power to 300 horsepower in the EU, which is the car we're testing, by the way, and down on torque 36 foot-pounds globally. It's even lost a gear. Yet, Mini has created a product that's unquestionably better in almost every metric that matters to the vast majority of potential owners. At $46,900 in the US, it's not cheap, but it's not much more than the previous car, and there's much more here. Mini has somehow defied the odds. They've grown the car, and yet, like the best JCW products, it blends everyday livability with performance in a really seamless way. It feels great driving it, and ultimately, it feels like a Mini should in this larger crossover segment. Give us a like and subscribe for more videos. We've got a ton in the queue. And head to MotoringFile.com for the entire review and way more on the all-new U25 Mini Countryman JCW.